spectroscopy.
Thank you very much.
I'll indicate 3 minutes from the end.
Okay, thank you. So hello, I'm Jennifer. I'm a Thunberg Fellow at Uppsala University and the Swedish Collegium for Advanced Studies, where I'm actually working with CRIRES, which you heard about yesterday from Alexei Levail. Today, I want to talk about the other half of my research, which is utilizing high-resolution spectroscopy to learn about the parameters of ultracool dwarfs. Because no work is done in isolation, I want to make sure I acknowledge my collaborators, Dr. Michael Cushing at the University of Toledo, who advised my PhD, Mark Marley from NASA Ames, and Greg Mace and Carolyn Morley from UT Austin, who have worked on this project with us. Uh-oh, there we go. Okay, I want to do sort of a quick terminology review as to what I mean when I talk about ultracool dwarfs, just to make sure we're all on the same page here. So when I use the term ultracool dwarf, I'm referring to any object with a spectral type of M7 or later, which is to say the late M dwarfs, the L dwarfs, the T dwarfs, and the Y dwarfs. These objects are a mix of low mass stars, which are capable of achieving stable hydrogen fusion, and brown dwarfs, which are not. Brown dwarfs are substellar objects. They fit between the most massive planets and the least massive stars. They have masses below what we refer to as the hydrogen burning minimum mass, 0.075 solar masses, which means they are not capable of achieving stable hydrogen fusion. This means that they cool as they age, giving them a mass luminosity age relation instead of a mass luminosity relation. Typically, their radii are about Jupiter, which given the range of their masses gives them densities ranging from about 1 to 100 grams per centimeter cubed. Why high resolution spectroscopy? And the simple answer when we were embarking upon doing this survey was because no one had done it before. We looked at where these types of objects had been studied. We found that the vast majority have photometry. Many of them have low resolution spectroscopy. Some have moderate resolution spectroscopy, and very few had been done at high resolution. And when we looked in particular at the high resolution studies that had been done, we found 3 main studies. McLean et al. In 2007 used NIRSpec on KEK2 to do 13 objects, but only in the J band. Blake et al. In 2010, who did 59 objects, also using NIRSpec on KEK2 in the K band. And Reiners et al. In 2007, who did 5 objects in the red optical using UVES on VLT. And what we noticed about these surveys is that all of them were limited in either the wavelength coverage they had been able to have or the number of objects they had been able to cover. And we wanted to know, could we do a large number of objects with broad wavelength coverage at high resolving power? And that was the motivation behind embarking upon this particular survey. Just to show you the difference that high resolution data makes, here are 3 spectra of the same object. The blue line at the top is a low resolution spectrum from PRISM on SPECS at a resolving power of 250. The green line is SPECS SXD at a resolving power of 2000, and the black line is one of my spectra from this survey taken using the Igren spectrograph with a resolving power of 45,000. One thing I learned very quickly about Igren's data is that you need to work with them in very, very small wavelength regions at a time or you don't see anything. So I zoomed in again on that figure for you. The inset at the very bottom is a zoom in around the CO band head. In red, I've identified both the CO band head and individual CO lines we've confirmed using the CO line list. That's not noise, that's real. Another motivation behind looking at objects in high resolution is we wanted to know if we'd be able to learn more about surface gravity. So the surface gravity of an object is a measurement of the gravitational acceleration at that object's surface. G equals gravitational constant times mass over radius squared. Typically, we report these as log G in units of centimeters per second squared. So be aware as I refer to them through the rest of my presentation that when I say log G, that's what I mean. One reason we were particularly interested in surface gravities is because, as I mentioned, for ultracool dwarfs, their radii are roughly Jupiter. And so we were thinking, well, maybe if we can measure surface gravity, that might be one way of getting at mass estimates, which for brown dwarfs historically is a problem unless they're in a binary or other dynamical system. Why do surface gravity at high resolution? Well, simply put, because you can't see it at low resolution. So this two-panel figure shows spectra with different temperature in the top two panels, spectra with different surface gravities in the middle two panels, and spectra with different amounts of clouds in the bottom two panels. The difference between the three panels on the left and the three panels on the right is they cover different temperature ranges. What I want you to notice if you look at the top panels and the bottom panels first is that you can notice differences between spectra of objects with different temperatures or spectra of objects with different amounts of clouds at lower resolving power. But then if you look at the objects in the middle panel, you don't see much difference between objects which have different surface gravities. And we wanted to know if at high resolution this would be better. And models suggested that it would be. We looked at models from Bohanti et al. In 2004. If you look at the right-hand panel of this figure, they show model absorption lines of objects of different surface gravities, and you do see a difference in the widths and depths of those lines as you change surface gravity. We wanted to know if we could see that in our data as well. The data from the survey were all taken using the 4-meter Lowell Discovery Telescope in Flagstaff, using a spectrograph called IGRINS, the Immersion Grating Infrared Spectrometer. This is a cross-dispersed near-infrared spectrograph. It has a resolving power of 45,000. It has two detectors, which allow you to observe the H and K band in a single exposure. It's a really, really neat instrument, giving you almost unbroken wavelength coverage between 1.5 and 2.5 microns with a small wavelength gap between the two detectors. Our spectroscopic sequence is 31 objects with spectral types ranging from M1.5 to T6. Our goal in the objects that we observed was to cover as many spectral types as possible and also to observe the brightest objects at each spectral type to maximize signal to noise. Getting high resolution spectra of ultracool dwarfs requires a lot of observation time, and to minimize that as best we could, we took the brightest objects available in each spectral class. Our field sequence is shown here in blue. We also got a sequence of known low gravity objects at 6 different spectral types shown here in red, in order to be able to try and look for those differences in surface gravity that I was talking about earlier. The goals of this survey were, first of all, to obtain high resolution spectra of a sequence of ultracool dwarfs because it had never been done before. So our data represent the first of their kind, the first time that we had covered a large number of spectral types across the spectral sequence with broad wavelength coverage at high resolution. And here is a subset of our data. As I said, IGRINS data are really difficult to visualize because the resolving power is so high. So I thought I'd show you small snippets of our spectra. So this is the CO bands of a sequence of our objects going from M6 in the upper left to T6 in the lower right, which I'm showing you, one, because I think that the spectra are beautiful, and two, just to show that we were able to get spectra of the sequence of objects that we were looking for. Our secondary goal was to obtain spectra of field and low gravity objects to see if differences in surface gravity are observable, and they are. This particular figure shows on the left a sequence of field objects and on the right a sequence of known low gravity objects. I want you in particular, I think it's most visible if you look at the two objects at the bottom, the L3 and the L5. If you look at the spectrum on the left versus the spectrum on the right, you'll notice a noticeable narrowing in the absorption lines in the lower gravity object. This is something we can't see in lower resolution data, but we can see in high resolution data. We're in the process of trying to figure out which wavelength regions are most sensitive to surface gravity, but I don't have any definitive results on that as of yet. The bulk of the work on this project up to this point has gone into comparing our spectra with model atmospheres to get estimates of different parameters. So I want to end today by telling you a bit about that and what we learned. We used the models of Simone and Marley from 2008 because we needed a grid of model atmospheres covering a large range of temperatures and also with clouds. Our temperature grid goes from 500 to 2400 Kelvin in steps of 100 Kelvin. Our models all have solar metallicity. We have surface gravities ranging 100, 1000, and 3000 meters per second squared. We also include different values of what we refer to as the sedimentation efficiency parameter, FSED, which measures how good an object is at getting rid of clouds. So higher values of FSED mean fewer clouds, lower values of FSED mean more clouds. We also had cloud-free models. We also added to our spectra V sin I by spinning them up with a rotation kernel, and we added radial velocity. Both of those were done in 1 kilometer per second steps. So this gave us a rather large grid of models with effective temperature, different effective temperatures, surface gravities, V sin I, clouds, and radial velocity. We then did fitting, comparing each of our object spectra against this model grid to return the best fitting model for each of our spectra. As of right now, I have results for 2 sets of fits, one where we did broadband fits, including most of the K-band, and one where we did, just to see how they would be different, a set of narrowband fits around the CO band head, where our data tend to be relatively not noisy. As an example, I just want to show you plots of some of our data compared against the models. So these are the CO band fits. The data are black. The models are shown in light blue. These range from M9 to T2.5, going down in spectral type from the upper left to the lower right. And I've listed the best fitting parameters for each model in blue, but mostly what I want you to get out of this figure is to see that we were able to get relatively good fits between the data and the models for pretty much all of our objects. And now I'll talk about results of individual parameters in a little more detail, starting with effective temperature. So I'm going to show you a sequence of figures that all have the same format, and I'm going to introduce them using this figure. So here I have effective temperature plotted versus spectral type. There are dark blue data points, which are our field objects, and there are light blue data points, which are our low gravity objects. The top panel of this figure, which you can see right now, shows the results of the CO band fits. Also plotted on this figure in black is the effective temperature spectral type relation of Filipazzo et al. 2015. We used these temperatures as a benchmark because they were generated from bolometric luminosities and model radii. And they are thought to represent some of the best values currently available, and we thought that would make a good benchmark to compare our temperatures to. The bottom panel of this figure is the same as the top, except these are now the K-band fits, and I have added an additional set of red data points from work done by Cushing et al. In 2008, using the same models and low resolution spectra. We wanted to compare our results to theirs to see how they were similar or different. So we noticed, first of all, that our effective temperatures tend to come out higher than those predicted by Filipazzo et al. In 2015. We note, however, that they agree well in the K-band with those found by Cushing et al. In 2008, using the same models at low resolution, and that the K-band temperatures tend to agree better with the Filipazzo relations than the CO band. And we think that's because essentially you get more information about your spectrum fitting over a broader wavelength range, you can fit more features. Next, we looked at surface gravity, and what we wanted to know here was whether or not we would get lower results for surface gravity in our low gravity objects from the fitting than we do in our field objects. The top panel is again the CO band fits. I'll note that the offset introduced between the light blue and the dark blue data points here is artificial, just to make it easier for you to see the data points. So in our CO band fits, we get lower surface gravities for 2 of our objects, but not the others. When we fit the whole K-band, we get lower surface gravities for all of them but 1. You'll notice the L1, we get the same surface gravity, but also the surface gravity for this object is coming out low for the field object. And so we don't know if we had a broader grid of surface gravities, whether or not we would see a difference. Hopefully, when we get the newer generation of models, we can learn a bit more about that. We also see pretty good agreement between our surface gravities of those of Cushing et al. From 2008, which is a good sign as well. Things got really interesting, though, when we looked at V sin I values. So here again, the dark blue are our field objects, and the light blue are our low gravity objects. And all the other data points of different colors are V sin I values for these objects from the literature. You'll notice in both the K-band and the CO band fits, our V sin I values come out higher. And I'm going to be really honest and tell you I don't know why yet. We're looking into this. Previous work done by other groups suggests that it might have something to do with the fact that iron hydride isn't included in the model atmospheres, but it's very prominent in the spectra of ultracool dwarfs, and they've noticed that affects their results for V sin I. We're looking into that. We don't really know yet. We're trying to figure out whether it's an artifact of the fitting or the models or something else, and we're doing more model fits to try and figure out what the answer to this is. Lastly, I want to show you something else we found really interesting is that we see systematic differences between our K-band and CO band fits. So for example, for the CO band fits, we find systematically higher effective temperatures. We also find systematically higher surface gravities in the CO band fits versus the K-band. Our V sin I values tend to be higher in the K-band than they are in the narrower CO band fits. And for FZ, the clouds, we find higher values of FZ in the CO band, which means our CO band fits are returning fewer clouds than our K-band fits. We thought this was really interesting and rather unexpected. And what we're in the process of doing is doing more narrowband model fits, and we're going to compare those against the broadband K-band fits, and we'll do the same in the H-band. And I'm interested to see whether these systematics also show up with other narrowband fits, or if there's something unique about the K-band. We don't know yet, but we're looking into it. So in summary, we obtained the first sequence of ultracool dwarfs covering a large range of spectral types with broad wavelength coverage at high resolving power. We obtained spectra of both field objects and known low gravity objects, which we're going to use to look for gravity sensitive features because differences in surface gravity are visible at high resolution. We've done model fits between our objects and the models of Simone and Marley from 2008 that has given us effective temperatures, surface gravities, V sin I values, radial velocities, and clouds. And we're in the process of looking into those results to understand them a bit better and doing some more model fits to learn more. And I'm happy to take questions now. I've also included my email in case you don't get a chance to ask your question. Please email me. I would love to hear from you.
So Jennifer, thank you very much for that very interesting talk. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I just have a quick one.
Yeah,
Jennifer, really nice talk and amazing data, amazing spectra. I got a kind of a left field question for you. Have you considered looking for auroral signatures on these planets with such high spectral resolution? There's a lot of energy output in the infrared, but I worry that the main species I can think of the top of my head is like H3+, which I think is like 3 micron transitions. And I think you didn't quite go up that north, but I'm just wondering if you considered any auroral signatures in your band and seeing if you can detect them.
We hadn't, but it's a good idea. I'd be interested in looking into that. And as you say, seeing if there are any within the wavelength region that we have, because we only have the H and K bands right now.
Yeah, I'm a radio astronomer, so I'm not enough expert, but I just thought it's an interesting thing because I know a lot of this work has been hampered by not having enough spectral resolution to really pin these auroral features down, and you might have that. So
Well, and I also, I mean, sneak preview, because we talked about CryRes yesterday, would love to get some spectra of these with broader wavelength coverage and look into some of those types of things as well.
Yeah, sounds good.
So since there aren't any more questions, I have one. How reliable are the V-sin measurements, and do they are they in line with what you expect? Because even though there's a variation with different different analyses, there's still a general trend. Is that what you expect?
Yes, the V-sin I values do come out in the ranges that we would expect for objects of these temperatures, which is to say that most brown dwarfs are rapidly rotating, and we do find V-sin I values in the expected range. The only thing that we're a little bit wary of at this point is trying to understand why we have an offset between ours and what other people are getting, but I've been in contact with some people doing model fits on different types of objects to try and figure out if we can track this down.
So how well are the actual models constrained for these ultra-cool dwarfs?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Well, so the known problem with the models right now is iron hydride, and this is where if I gave this talk a year from now, I would have the new grid of models with better iron hydride coverage, and it will probably change the results of these fits quite a bit, but they're not available yet. So I'm interested to see how much things change when we get the next generation of model atmospheres in a few months.